Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatly Tone's Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. Now if you were here for my last video, you'll recall that we talked about the Beatles in mono vinyl box set, and we talked about how difficult that box set is to find these days, and if you do happen to stumble across one, how expensive they are to buy. Now in today's video I'm going to be talking about another Beatles box set, an 8LP Beatles box set, but the good thing about this box set is that it's not very difficult to find. You can find them all over eBay, you can find them on Facebook Marketplace, and even better news is they're not very expensive to buy. You can pick them up fairly cheaply, especially when considering that there are 8 LPs in the box. Now there's a couple of interesting things about this box set. Is firstly, it was not available to buy in the shops. Now it's not a bootleg box set, it's an official release through EMI, but it was only available to order through mail order, and you could only order it if you were a resident of the UK, Japan, Mexico and Australia. So if you hail from outside of those 4 territories, you may not have seen this box before, or you may not have heard of it, or if you have heard of it, you might not know much about it. Now another interesting thing about this box set is that when it was released in 1980, a lot of the mixes on the box set were new to us here in the UK because they hailed from different countries, different takes, that sort of thing. So that made the box set a bit of an essential pickup for Beatles fans, and henceforth it has become a little bit of a collector's item, but you're not paying collector's item prices for it. So as I say, it came from 1980, so let's go back through the midst of time back to 1980. To say that 1980 was a terrible year for Beatles fans could be construed as being the understatement of the century. The year had got off to a terrible start. On the 16th of January 1980, Paul was arrested at Tokyo Airport, being caught with roughly about 3 lorry loads worth of marijuana stuffed inside his suitcase. The Wings Japanese tour of Japan was cancelled, which pissed off all the Japanese fans, and Paul was slung in a Japanese jail for 8 days, where he sat in the communal baths with rapists and murderers and sang them Yesterday. A bit later in the year, in May 1980, he brought out McCartney 2, which turned out to be not very good at all. And everyone was a little bit confused about what was going on. Was Paul now a solo artist? Had Wings split up? No one really knew. It was all a little bit confusing. As for John, the last we'd heard from John in 1979, he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, delivered a message for fans to let us all know what was going on with John. A bit later in 1980, we found out that he was back in the studio recording a new album, and we all know how that story ends. As for George and Ringo, they delivered nothing in 1980 whatsoever. The Beatles, EMI had been on this sort of theme-based compilation trip for quite a few years. They were repackaging the Beatles in every way they could think of. It sort of started with this album in 1976, double album Rock and Roll Music, another theme-based compilation album in 77, a double album Love Songs, and another theme-based compilation in 79, the Beatles Ballads, which was very nice, or it would have been had not almost all the tracks already been out on the Love Songs album. In 1979, they released the Beatles Rarities. Now, the Beatles Rarities first appeared as part of the Beatles collection box set in 1978. It was used as a selling point for that box set. It was only going to be available in the blue box set, the BC13, but then in 1979 they thought, we'll put it out anyway. So everyone who bought the Beatles blue box set was a little bit cross about that. The trouble with the Beatles Rarities is nothing's that rare on it at all. In fact, it's got sleeve notes on the back. This is the way that I got this album, by the way. I didn't buy the box set. It's got sleeve notes on the back, which are barely readable these days. But in the second paragraph, it says, no, there's nothing unreleased on this album. So not really that rare at all. Basically what this album was, if you like, an early prototype of the past masters. It kind of included B-sides and other non-album tracks, but not a complete set of those. So basically, by the time 1980 come, EMI were just totally out of ideas. So out of decent ideas were EMI that they palmed off their next selection of Beatles reissues to their budget label MFP, which stood for Music for Pleasure, and they released that rock and roll music album that I just showed you as two separate LPs, Rock and Roll Music Part 1, Rock and Roll Music Part 2. They also released quite a few Beatles solo albums on that budget label. John's Rock and Roll album, his Mind Games album, George's Dark Horse, and The Best of George Harrison, and Ringo's Ringo album and Blast from Your Past were also issued on this budget label in a much more pared down sort of packaging. It didn't have the original artwork, didn't have the original packaging, and these retailed for about 99p. Now for their next project, they enlisted the help of a bloke called Simon Sinclair, who worked for EMI's mail order subsidiary World Records, and his job was to compile a set list for an 8LP Beatles box set. And on the 3rd of November 1980, this box set was released, the Beatles Box as it was known, sometimes known as From Liverpool, the Beatles Box, but mostly amongst Beatles circles it's known as the Beatles Box. And as I say, it was an 8LP, 124 track LP box set. It also came out on cassette. Now, World Records have kind of got history with issuing mail order box sets, mostly classical and jazz, but they had released a few pop box sets as well. Cliff Richard had one, the Beach Boys had one as well, and they issued these through the Reader's Digest magazine, which was like a sort of a subscription magazine that old people subscribe to. If you were a subscriber to Reader's Digest, you would have got a flexi disc through the post with your latest issue of Reader's Digest that played at 33 1/3, and you put it on your record player and it would tell you all about the Beatles box. Now unfortunately I don't have a flexi disc to show you because obviously I was far too young to subscribe to something like Reader's Digest. The other ways that you could get to find out about this Beatles box was they took out adverts in the British national newspapers and also in magazines as well. Now, as I said, this box set wasn't available in record shops, and it was only available in the UK, in Japan, in Mexico and in Australia. So if you wanted it, you had to buy it through mail order. Now, back in November 1980, this 8LP or 8 cassette box set cost the princely sum of £29.75. Now what I did was I put £29.75 into the Bank of England inflation calculator on the Bank of England's website to find out what £29.75 would be worth in today's money, and the answer that came back at me was just shy of 120 quid. That's about 145 US dollars, 135 euros, 195 Canadian dollars and about 215 Aussie dollars, which probably makes this box set the best value Beatles box set there has ever been. Now at the end of the video I'll tell you how much I paid for mine, and that's obviously what you should pay as well if you're looking for this box set. Now because this box set came out in November 1980, it became the last Beatles release to come out during John Lennon's lifetime. And I must admit, I don't really remember seeing adverts for this box set around that time, but I certainly remember seeing them in the newspapers in the early months of 1981 after John had died. You couldn't really move for adverts. They were literally putting an advert in the papers sort of every other day, absolutely thrashing it to death, as trying to really sort of cash in on the newfound interest in John Lennon and the Beatles in general. Now, I did have a look around that internet thing to try and find an original newspaper advert from 1980, but I couldn't really find anything. But this box set was re-released in 1982 with a slight price hike, and I did manage to find a full colour advert for this that had appeared in one of those sort of grown-up magazines, not that sort of grown-up magazine, the grown-up magazines, and we're going to have a look at that now. So here is the magazine advert from 1982. Unique offer, 124 legendary original tracks. First ever 8-album collector's edition from the Beatles. And then there's this paragraph where it's terribly written with no spaces in between the words and some rogue use of apostrophes. Yours at a speciality, low collectors only price. A dazzling showcase collection of all the Beatles' greatest hits, now on 8 precious LPs or cassettes. And then this little yellow box at the bottom on the right hand side, that was what you had to cut out and send off to get your box set. Send no money now, post today, no stamp needed, and you just had to tick whether you wanted the LP set or the cassette set, your name and your address and your postcode and your signature. And you had to be over 18 to buy this, because you had to pay by credit card, and you have to be 18 in the UK to have a credit card. And there was even a credit option as well. Pay a deposit of £11.50 followed by 3 monthly payments of £8.85, total £37.15. So paying slightly more if you paid on credit. So when I saw those newspaper adverts in 1981, I just thought, well, I don't need this. I've got all the songs that are on this box set. I had a complete set of UK stereo albums that I picked up in 1976 when I first became a Beatles fan. I just thought, I don't need it. So it just passed me by. But I found out later on that this box set has got some unique mixes that had never been released in the UK, that have come from different countries around the world. Some of the tracks had edits on it that hadn't been released in the UK. Some had extra bits that hadn't been released before. And so this box set became an essential purchase for anyone who was a serious Beatles collector, because some of the versions weren't available elsewhere. Now, I'll go into the differences that are on this box set from the regular releases when I show you the box in a minute, but this did pass me by. But I'm glad that I've picked this up now, even though some of those mixes that were exclusive to this box set back in 1980 have now been released generally since then, as there's been a lot of Beatles albums that have come out between 1980 and now. So let's go and have a look at the box. So this is the Beatles box from the front with the crate design. Looks like that from the back, and that's the side, and there's nothing on the other side. Now the box sort of opens up like this with the track listing on the inside of the lid. I'll just stand up to show you that. But the track listing is on each of the LPs, and the LPs sort of sit in the box like that. Okay, so I'm going to show you each album. I won't show you every vinyl because they all pretty much look the same, but I will show you the first album vinyl so you get an idea. So album number 1, which covers the sort of Please Please Me and With the Beatles albums, that's the track listing, and also the singles in between. And there are sleeve notes written by Hugh Marshall on each of the albums. Now each album comes in a polyline sleeve, and the record looks like that with the 2-box EMI Parlophone label. This side too. And the things of note on the label is you've got the record number written there and the Beatles Box written there, and pretty much every vinyl is the same as this, except the record number is obviously different, so I don't need to show you them all. Now the differences on this album is that the so Love Me Do is the single version, the one with Ringo. There's a mock stereo remix of PS I Love You. She Loves You is a mock stereo remix that was used only on a collection of oldies but goldies. And All My Loving has got the 5 beats of Ringo's hi-hat before Paul comes in, and you hear him breathe in before he sings Close Your Eyes, and that is from the German With the Beatles album, and those are the differences that are on LP1 of this set. LP2 looks like this, and you may have spotted the accidental error on this picture where Paul has become a right-hander and John has become a left-hander. Now, you know, I said that there was the box set was released in 1980 and then it was released again later in 82. Well, that's how you tell whether you've got an early one or a late one, because the picture was reversed in the early one and corrected later. So my particular copy hails from 1980. Now the tracks on this album, there's the I Wanna Hold Your Hand, This Boy single. There's 8 tracks from the 13 on Hard Day's Night, the Long Tall Sally EP, and I Feel Fine and She's a Woman single. Again, sleeve notes by Hugh Marshall. Now the differences on this LP is And I Love Her has got the 6-bar guitar riff at the end of the song that appeared on the US Rarities album. That comes from the German Something New album. The Long Tall Sally EP, the tracks from that are in stereo, although they did appear in stereo on the Rock and Roll Music album for the first time, but they're here again in stereo. But She's a Woman is here in stereo for the first time in 1980, and the version of I Feel Fine is the one with the whispering at the beginning, which I think says go up or something like that. That is the one that was used on the UK version of the Red album, so that's LP2. So moving on to LP3, which covers the Beatles for Sale and Help periods in part. That's the front, that's the back. So the track listing here, we get 8 tracks from Beatles for Sale, 7 tracks from Help, plus I'm Down, which is in stereo, but it's not the first time it's been in stereo, because it was in stereo on the Rock and Roll Music album, so there's no other alternate takes on LP3. So moving on to LP4, which looks like this. This covers sort of 1965, so that's quite an odd photo to have on the front cover. That's a much earlier shot than that. The back looks like this. So with the track listing, we get a further 6 tracks from Help, meaning that Dizzy Miss Lizzy is the only track from Help that's not on this box set. A very wise move, in my opinion. We also get the Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out single, and then we get 8 tracks from Rubber Soul. Now the only alternate mix on this LP is Day Tripper, which uses the American Yesterday and Today mix from 1965. Now you might remember that they did a remix of that for Oldies But Goldies, and they used that remix kind of throughout all other releases, like the 62, 66 had that mix, and so did the Past Masters CDs as well, and they kind of corrected a few things for the 2000 release of the One album, and that's LP4. So on to LP5, which looks like this. I'm just trying to turn it away so you don't get the glare. This LP hails from 1966, so again an odd photo to put on the front, which I think comes from 1963. The back of the LP looks like that. The track listing kicks off with the Paperback Writer Rain single, then we get 10 tracks from Revolver, and then Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields at the end. Now 10 tracks from Revolver, but inexplicably it leaves off Tomorrow Never Knows and She Said, the other two tracks that are missing from this box set are the two George Harrison songs, Love You Too and I Want to Tell You. Now, alternate mixes on this LP, there's 4, I think. Paperback Writer uses the US Hey Jude album cut, where the stereo imaging is reversed, so what normally comes out of the left speaker comes out of the right, and vice versa. I'm Only Sleeping is from the stereo Yesterday and Today, the US mix, and there's like about a 1 or 2 beat gap in before the backwards guitar solo comes in the middle there. Anya Birkinsing is also from the stereo Yesterday and Today mix, and Penny Lane is the one that was on the US rarities with the extra little flourish of piccolo trumpet at the end. So that's LP5. So LP6 covers 1967 and looks like that, and they've got the right picture for this one. That one coming from the Our World recording of All You Need Is Love, those sessions. And the back looks like that. And the track listing here hails from Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour. And we've got 9 songs from Sgt. Pepper. The missing songs from Sgt. Pepper is Getting Better, Within You, Without You, Good Morning, and Sgt. Pepper Reprise. 6 from Magical Mystery Tour. Now the alternate takes on here, A Day in the Life is the slightly edited version that they used on the Blue album. All You Need Is Love is a mono version. Baby You're a Rich Man is a true stereo version that comes from the German Magical Mystery Tour. And I'm the Walrus is the composite mix that was made by the Capitol engineers, that's got that extra bar of instrumentation before the Yellow Matter Custard verse, and that's LP6. So the penultimate album, LP7, hails mostly from 1968. So a picture from the Mad Day Out photo sessions is the right photo to put on here. The back looks like this, and we get a few singles at the beginning, Hello Goodbye, Lady Madonna, Hey Jude with its B-side Revolution. Then we get 10 tracks from the White Album, just 10 out of the 30 tracks on the White Album, and it ends with All Together Now from Yellow Submarine. Why they chose All Together Now rather than Hey Bulldog, I don't know, but they did. There's only 2 alternate mixes on this LP. So Bungalow Bill is missing that Mellotron intro, the thing that sounds like it's like a classical guitar flurry, but is actually played on the Mellotron. That is missing from this, that's edited out. And Don't Pass Me By on this LP is the mono Don't Pass Me By from the Mono White Album, which is quite different from the stereo version, and that's LP7. So we've arrived at the final LP in the set, LP8. 8, and this one comes from 1969. So again, they've used the wrong photo on the front. The photo coming, another photo from the Our World session in 1967. Now, the back looks like that. All the songs come from singles and the Let It Be album and Abbey Road album. Now, quite interesting, the sequencing on this, because throughout this box set they've sequenced everything in chronological order of release. Here although the Let It Be sessions, the Get Back sessions, were recorded before Abbey Road, it obviously came out afterwards, but they've sequenced it before Abbey Road here, which is unusual for this box set. Now, also, they've paired Get Back and Don't Let Me Down together as if it's the A-side and the B-side of the single, but actually the Get Back version on here is the Let It Be album version, as is Across the Universe, and as is the song Let It Be is the superior album version with that great guitar solo from George. Now, when we get to side 2, these all hail from Abbey Road. And there are no alternate mixes on this LP, but the only real difference is that the gap between the end and Her Majesty is only 5 seconds, where it's 20 seconds on the Abbey Road album. But I don't think we can really call 15 seconds of silence an alternate track. So that is the final LP in the box, LP 8. So my overall thoughts about the Beatles box is that it is a really good box set. I only picked it up last year and I'm very pleased that I did. I bought it from Facebook Marketplace and I paid 50 quid for it. The guy that I bought it off, he said that it was his dad's, it was in his dad's collection. He was selling off his dad's collection. And this box set, the LPs, I mean, they sound like they've never been played. There was no surface noise on them at all, no visible scratches on it at all either, and it's very, very quiet to play, and it sounds great. The records on here were cut by Harry Moss, who cut the original Beatles albums back in the 60s. Even LP8, which covers Abbey Road and Let It Be, which Harry Moss didn't cut back in the 60s, is cut by him on this box set. So it's a great sounding box set as well. Now, it's not a career, I mean, it is a career spanning box set, but what I mean is it doesn't cover everything. There are songs missing from this, but it gives a good overview, and it's really interesting because of the alternate mixes on here. Now, obviously, the alternate mixes do not have as much value to Beatles fans, and I'm talking about to collectors rather than monetary value, as this box set did when it was released back in 1980, because a lot of these alternate mixes have now come out on subsequent releases, but there are still some that have never come out, and especially in the UK. And obviously this box set was only released in the UK, Australia, Mexico and Japan, so it never came out in the US, it never came out in Canada. So it's worth seeking from that point of view, I think. 50 quid, I think, was a good price that I got it. I've seen people on eBay and Facebook Marketplace trying it on, trying to sell it for 300 quid, but there are lots out there for 50, 60, 70 pounds, and for that sort of money it is definitely worth it. I do think this is the best value Beatles box set on the market at the moment. So if you fancy it, go and find one, but don't pay more than 100 quid for it, because there are loads out there and you can pick it up fairly easy for under £100 for sure. Okay, well, if you fancy this, fancy getting this, please tell me about it down in the comments. If you've got it, please tell me your thoughts about it down in the comments. I love to hear from you. As always, I read all your comments and I respond to all of your comments as well. If you've liked this video, please give it the thumbs up. If you're seeing this channel for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel and supporting the channel in that way. Hit that notification bell and you'll get a notification whenever a new video drops from this channel. Thanks very much everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.